All right, hi, my name's Andy Sykes. I'm the Associate Director here at Campus Recreation at Wichita State University. I am the nutrition specialist, strength and conditioning specialist here. And today we are doing number one of our 3 nutrition discussions for the fall 2021 semester. Today we're talking about protein and its role in our bodies, how we metabolize it, digest it, and actually utilize protein, and comparing all the different sources. There's a number of different things out there that are all just protein sources, and in supplementation as well. And what are we actually buying? What's happening once we digest that, and what is it being used for inside the body? So hopefully you can follow me through this, and I'll have my email at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions, you can contact me via that. All right, so let's move on. Nutrition discussion, protein. So what is protein? Well, protein is an essential nutrient in our diet that we need for a number of different processes. Actually, I'll put the functions up in a second, but it builds into all tissues, whether it's muscle, organs, bones, ligaments, tendons, hair. I mean, all of your tissues within the human body have proteins. Okay, so they build that structure, and it's one of the main roles that protein's known for. But they also are enzymes. So within our saliva, we have enzymes. Within our stomach, our pancreas releases enzymes. Our small intestine releases enzymes, and these break down our food. So they're protein derived amino acid type enzymes. So without protein intake, we can't even produce the enzymes to break down the food that we consume. They also are peptide hormones, so protein-based hormones that have a role in our body, that epinephrine, norepinephrine examples that stimulate the body and help drive our metabolism. They also transport nutrients across the body. They help move, albumin in the blood, or they help osmosis and pressure gradients through the body. And they also provide a balance of pH as they buffer acid or different metabolites from energy production in the blood. And the last thing that a protein can be used for is energy. And that's kind of a last resource of why we need to consume protein, is it can be used for energy when we're in low fed states. So you can see here a slide that we've got the functions of protein. I kind of mentioned a few of those already, but they help us digest with the enzymes that we can produce. So they facilitate that chemical reaction. They actually boost our immune system too. So they help produce our antibodies. They help expression of our DNA. So we'll get to this in a future slide, but actually how proteins are synthesized. They're transcribed in the cytoplasm, in these ribosome organs, in our cells of our muscle cells and cells of our body. They help move, like I said, transport and move molecules around. They aid in hormone production. And of course, they help build our tissues and help our bones, muscles grow stronger. Okay, so they help use our metabolism too. They boost metabolism. They help you gain weight in terms of muscle mass, but they also help you lose weight for weight loss. And hopefully I'll try to explain that through some of these slides. So let's start with where do we actually get our protein in our diets, the different sources. And I've got a few different images up there that hopefully give you an idea of the variety of foods that you can get protein from. Almost not all, but there's a larger variety of foods. Of course, when you think protein, a lot of people think meat straight away, and that's because all animal products are going to have all the essential amino acids that protein is broken down into. And so those are great sources of protein. There are other things to consider when consuming protein, such as the fiber content, the micronutrient content of our vitamins and our minerals that come in with that source as well. As well as the fat level. Saturated fat normally quite high in protein sources, but not all sources. But you can see there are also plant-based sources there too. Beans, legumes, hemp seeds, peas, things like that, soy are plant-based protein sources, and those are just as valuable as the meats. But the fiber content that comes with them is an area for discussion about how much we actually utilize on that protein and all the amino acids in there. One thing I will note is that the amino acids that protein breaks down into, and that I'll get to in a second, varies from each of these different sources. So there are 20 different amino acids. There may be some that are higher in some aminos and lower in others, which give you kind of a priority or a quality of protein that we scale it. So lots of different sources that you can see that are shown on the screen. But what do they break down into? Well, it's amino acids, okay? It doesn't matter what source that you get your protein from, whether it be a fish, beef, cow, chicken, whether you get peas, seeds, doesn't matter where it comes from. The protein part of that food comes from 20 different amino acids, and 9 of those are essential and 11 of those are non-essential. Essential means you just must consume them, has to come from your diet, and the non-essential means you don't have to consume. Our body can actually produce some of those on our own. And then you've got that list there in the middle, which is conditionally essential, which means sometimes they're essential, other times, providing we have all the essential nutrients or amino acids, we can actually produce these conditionally essential ones. So just depends on the diet and completely. Hopefully you can see on the left side of that screen that you've got a long polypeptide chain. And so when you eat a food structure and you start breaking it down, it's a coil of protein polypeptides, long protein strains and strands, and they're called together in quite a mess. And it's the role of the digestive system to break down that coil of protein, a ball, a cluster, and to wring it out and make it into a long sequence of peptides, and that's a strain of amino acids. And so that left image hopefully shows you a long linear strain of amino acids, and each of those small dots is an individual amino acid, and they can be sequenced from very few all the way up to like 30,000 amino acids in a sequence to create a protein. Okay, it'd be a long polypeptide, a long protein, but it's still a protein. And so when you consume that, you start breaking it back down into these individual amino acids. And in the middle, it shows all 20 there, shows you if they're essential, non-essential, and some of the more acidic, more alkaline, or they have contain sulfur, which goes into some of the roles they have in the body. Another area that's listed there is the branched chain amino acids. And so these get quite a big hype nowadays. Those can be metabolized for energy inside muscle cell, which all of the other 17 cannot do that. So they're quite special in that regard. Most amino acids have to be used or go through a process called gluconeogenesis in the liver to actually be used for energy. But branched chain amino acids don't have to do that. So they're quite special, and they're often highlighted for that quality. Okay. Because of that, they're even sold as a supplement on its own. But again, look at the bigger picture. They're amino acids, and any protein source is going to have those in it. Okay, and that's the theme we'll get to as we look at all these different types of supplements. So I just went online and I pulled out some images of different types of proteins. Now there are a lot here, and so hopefully I can start to break down the options that we have and maybe why we want to choose one over the other. And there's a lot here, and maybe you didn't even know some of these were protein. Okay, so let's start on the bottom left here. Whey protein concentrate. What is that? Well, whey protein concentrate, whey in general, comes from milk, so cow's milk. And so what they do with cow's milk is add an acid. Often it's a very simple acid. You can even do this at home with vinegar, or even lemon juice is a good acid to use. And you pour that into milk and do it gently, and you actually use some heat to it too, because that will break down the protein within the milk, and it will start to break apart between a liquid component and a more solid component. They actually do this in the process of making cheese. Okay, so you bring out the water component and you keep the curd at the bottom. Now, whey protein concentrate is that liquid part of milk. And so it has all these amino acids that are very readily available. And we take that out and we basically dehydrate it into a powder, and that's whey concentrate. Now, within that, there are some sugars. We've got lactase, or lactose, sorry. that is a milk sugar that is part of that liquid part of the milk. And we also got some fat in that milk. So as a concentrate, we don't just have protein, we have protein and a small amount of fat and a small amount of sugar. Roughly about 80% of a concentrate is protein, and about 20% is fat and carbohydrate. Now, the next step is to pull those fat and carbohydrates out, and that's called a whey protein isolate. And so they isolate the proteins. And so this goes from 80% to 90% or better being protein source, and very little carbohydrate, very little fat. So when you're looking at these protein bottles, you're going to find that there is there's going to be a smaller number of fat or carbohydrate in the supplement facts panel on the ingredients list. Okay, so it's more of an isolated, it's normally a little bit more expensive because they're doing the extra process, but you're going to have less calories. Do you need it? Well, that depends on your goals. Are you really trying to stay lean and stay away from the carbohydrates? Are you trying to stay away from the fat and just have that protein? Or does it not really matter? Maybe if you're trying to gain weight and trying to actually increase size, maybe that's against what you're actually trying to achieve. The next part of whey is hydrolysate whey, and that is taking an isolate and then adding more heat and even some enzymes that will continue to break down those amino acids so that they are quickly absorbed. When you consume them, they are very fastly absorbed in the body. And so again, another process. So it's an increased fee when you purchase this supplement, and it's quicker absorption. You've got to decide, is that an advantage of quicker absorption worth the price that you're paying, and does it meet the goals that you want? Often, no. The body breaks down all these proteins anyway, so do you need the lab to do that prior to consumption? Probably not very necessary. Next up is casein. Casein protein is the opposite of whey protein. It is that curd, that thick part of the milk that they extract whey from. And so when you take the whey out, the liquid part of that milk, and you're left with the solid curd part, this is a lot thicker, a lot harder to metabolize. And so again, you go through a dehydration process, you then blend it up into a powder, and you can consume that. And this is a lot longer process to metabolize. When you consume casein, it will take you 4 to 5 hours to actually of amino acids being pushed into the blood as you digest it, whereas whey protein gets in the blood within 90 minutes, say. So it's a lot more extended, and therefore the uses would be more when you can't consume food afterwards. So at night, often casein is taken before bed, so that during that fasted time, 6 to 8 hours that you sleep, when you're not eating, you can still get an amino acid source, a protein source throughout the night, because this casein will continually be slowly broken down. And yes, it would increase your metabolism to a degree that you wouldn't normally be consuming at night as your body continues to break that down. Often get a lot of questions about collagen peptide proteins, collagen proteins. Now these are sourced from different hides. So bovine hide is the most common source of that. And again, though, it is just amino acids in sequence, right? So as you consume these collagen peptides, your body's going to break it down into these single amino acids, push it into the blood, and then cells will uptake it. And I'll go through more of that process soon. But the source doesn't really matter. Again, the timing is more of a thing than the source. What does change with the different sources is the abundance of a certain amino acid. Okay, so collagen, for example, is high in proline, glycine, and hydroxyproline. Okay, of the 20 different amino acids, different sources will have higher numbers of certain amino acids. Yeah, that moves pretty much onto the plant protein. Okay, so you can have a number of different vegan source proteins. Some people eat the pea protein. Now, when you have pea protein, you want a complete you have a complete array of essential amino acids. There are some missing. For pea, it is low in methionine. Okay, pea protein doesn't have that methionine amino acid. But it is rich in the branched chain amino acids, so leucine, isoleucine, and valine. You can get hemp protein, and that's low in lysine. Soy protein is another plant-based one that has all the essential amino acids. But again, it's going to have different numbers or different concentrations of the different amino acids. And so once that is metabolized in your body, once it becomes available in your blood, and you start to utilize those amino acids and you sequence those through a transcription, and we'll get to that in a second, but what amino acids are available give you the ability to create certain proteins. So some are more prone to creating muscle mass because they sequence the amino acids that you need there, while some are more for connective tissue. And that's what we see with the collagen peptides, is we got a high number of the proline glycine and hydroxyproline, and those are used in connective tissue, in skin. And so having lots of available means the body can utilize that and actually improve your skin cells and replenish the skin cells, things like that, in connective tissue. But if your body doesn't need those, it can use some of those amino acids to create other tissues. It just depends on the active and the need of the body. What else? We've got beef proteins up there on the top right. That's a carnivore beef protein. Again, it's just 20 amino acids. It's definitely going to have your 9 essential because it is an animal source. And then once you break it down, you've got amino acids in your body. Then your body has to decide what it wants to do with those, and that's based on its status, its stress level, and what needs replenishing. Some people don't realize creatine. Creatine is a protein source. Okay, creatine is stored in our muscle. It's 95% in the muscle. It's 5% in the brain, but it is 3 amino acids. It's arginine, glycine, and methionine. Those 3 together make creatine, and creatine is used in the energy system, or the phosphagen energy system, for explosive energy production. So very well-known supplement, very good for you. And we don't actually break that down into the individual amino acids. Once you get to the absorption of amino acids, they can go through as tripeptides, dipeptides, or single amino acids. And we'll get, again, next coming slides will show you that digestive process. What about our other things? Nitric oxide. I put this one in here because the main thing for nitric oxide production, and that's a vasodilator to help blood flow in the body. The main thing is arginine, which is an amino acid. So that is a protein. Okay, so that amino acid helps dilate and relax the blood vessels. They open up, better and easier blood flow, lower blood pressure, more supply of nutrients if you're fueling the body well. So another protein source. And we've already mentioned the branched chain amino acids. You can buy those individually, where they'll take the 20 amino acids and they'll just extract those 3, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, and put them into a supplement, and you can consume them that way. Again, you're just choosing the amino acids by choosing the source. And depending on what you want it to do, whether that be more of a tissue building, or maybe a skin connective tissue, or an energy system, or a vasodilator, you get to choose the product in it. But again, they're all amino acids. You would get all of these amino acids from eating any type of protein source. But then the body has to say, okay, I need this one, I pull it here and put it in the body. Our bodies are very sophisticated, can do all of that. But yes, we can aid its process by supplementing it and getting the individual needs that it has for a certain role. But if it doesn't want to do that role, you're consuming it in complete waste, because the body will do what it wants to do based on the stimulus that it's given. All right, extra credit time. If you are watching this in my strength and conditioning class or my nutrition class, and you want your 5 points of extra credit, email me the code word amino acids, and I'll send you that extra credit point. And yeah, hopefully you're learning something. So the breakdown process that I've hinted to before for protein, actually, well, of course, when we consume protein, it goes through the mouth, but we don't have any enzymes in the mouth that break down protein. We do for carbohydrates and fats, but not for protein itself. So we get to chew up that protein, whether it be a steak or a fish or an egg, or it be a supplement powder that we swish around in our mouth and swallow. But nothing actually happens within the mouth other than the mechanical chewing, and that increases surface area. So once it gets to the stomach, we can have more interaction with the hydrochloric acid that's there, and that hydrochloric acid denatures the protein, which is having that ball of these amino acids all in sequence. And on that bottom right side of this page, you can see I've got a cluster of different polypeptide amino acids there, and acid starts to unravel them and starts to move it towards the polypeptide chain, which you see to its left, and starts to break it apart. And so more enzymes can interact. So that's in the stomach. You also have an enzyme known as pepsin that starts to break down these polypeptide chains into the smaller, shorter lengths that can get more interaction again. Then once it's passed through the stomach and goes into the duodenum, the small intestines, the pancreas can squirt in some enzymes there known as proteases, as well as the small intestine itself releasing some proteases. And those break down these polypeptide chains into smaller peptide chains, these smaller units, and even to the point where they can go into a further enzyme, peptidase, will break them down into the individual amino acids, or less than 3 amino acids in a sequence. So you start with potentially 30,000 amino acids in a sequence, and the unraveling with the acid and different enzymes that are in your stomach, your small intestine, unravel it, break it down into smaller and smaller compartments so that it can actually get into the body. Right now, it's still in the intestines, and it needs to get through the intestinal wall to get into the bloodstream. In order to do that, it has to be small enough to go through, and they go through these protein gates. They are either actively transported when they're a single amino acid, or they're facilitated through the intestinal wall and that process to get into the blood. So we have to break them down all the way into these individual amino acids, which is the reason why it doesn't matter the source. It has to get broken down to single amino acids to get into the body. But then the concentrations of each of these different 20 amino acids based on the source gives it, okay, what can the body do with them? So the absorption. So I've shown you here on the right side a number of different types of protein source, and you've got all sorts of things there, and you even got the comparison of human muscle right on the end. Okay, but obviously there's way more sources of protein than what's shown, but hopefully you get an idea. You've got the 20 different amino acids, essential listed first and then non-essential listed second on the left side of that chart, and you can see the values based on that. So again, as you're consuming these sources, they're broken down and absorbed into the blood. This is a detailed breakdown of the amino acid profile in the blood after 100 grams of the raw material was consumed. Okay, so you see the difference of different amino acids. So some are good at delivering, phenylalanine, versus some may be really good at the leucine. Just based on the source, getting those amino acids into the body and being available for your nucleus in the cell to actually have synthesis of protein synthesis to actually occur. And that's a transcription process, which I'll cover in the next slide. On the left side, you'll see the PDCAA values based on source 2. Again, this is just another resource for you to look at and understand. And PDCA is the protein digested corrected amino acid score, which looks at basically the fiber content and the digestibility of the protein. That's one of the discussions that commonly comes up about different sources of protein, is how much do you actually digest and absorb based on its fiber content. The more fiber is a carbohydrate that you don't take any caloric value to, and it pushes, it kind of stimulates the digestive GI tract to excrete matter, whether that be soluble or insoluble. But the more fiber content, the less protein you actually take out, because it kind of speeds that transit. So you can see the different values, and you're generally just going to see a higher value of 1, which is the good score with our meat or animal products, and the lower values with more of the plant-based products, because they're plants, they're going to have more of the fiber component. And so, yeah, you'll see those go down and then be more into the plant-based areas and more animal at the top. So then gets to the utilization. Once you've got amino acids in the blood, they become part of what's known as the amino acid pool. So this is within the blood, they're moving around, and they get basically pushed wherever the blood flow goes, and cells can then uptake them. Okay, once they're facilitated into those cells, and once they can be given a role. And in order to do that, the cell has to first have a instruction list, basically, to sequence them in the right order to create a new protein strand. So we broke them down. They had a role in an animal or in a plant. We ate them. They broke down into individual amino acids, and now we build them up into a new role. And that new role depends on what the body wants it to do, what that cell is in need of. Okay, so in order to do that, within the DNA of our cell, within the nucleus, we've got the DNA, and those DNA have genes. Those are instructions on how to produce different proteins, how to produce different parts of the cells. And so then a messenger RNA takes a copy of that gene and pushes it to a ribosome. So the mRNA is a transcription, a transcribed DNA into an RNA, and then that goes to a ribosome. And in that ribosome, we construct new proteins. That's actually where the protein synthesis occurs. And it can only occur if there's amino acids available. And so you've got this list of instructions, and as the blood flow brings in these amino acids, a organ known as tRNA actually grabs the amino acids, and you'll have to grab a particular one, bring it in into the ribosome, and then it's put into that sequence that they need it. Now, if there's not one needed for the protein that's currently being produced, then manufacturing stops, right? We need to get that amino acid in the right place to give it its structure and its role in its use. So tRNA goes and gets the amino acids from the blood, puts it in the ribosome. It's then produced into a longer sequence of protein, and now you have a new polypeptide. Okay, this sequencing of putting these amino acids in place is known as transcription. And so whether you need a new skin cell, whether you need more protein, or maybe a new enzyme, ribosomes actually produce those through this transcription process, which all comes from the instructions had within the genes, within the DNA of our nucleus. Okay, so all of that happens. And again, depends what amino acids are available. If there's a bunch of amino acids that are available from just collagen, then the likelihood is that the ribosome is going to be producing a connective tissue or some sort of skin cell, because those are the amino acids that are available, and it can't do maybe a muscle tissue that needs different amino acids. So again, it's just what's available, and if there's no amino acid that it needs in the blood, then what it actually will do is catabolize other sources of protein. And now the main source of protein that we have in the human body is our muscle mass. It is novel. We don't need it to survive. And so if we go fasted and we don't eat enough, and yet we still need to create new proteins, enzymes, different things in the body will metabolize, catabolize, break down muscle cell and storage of amino acids, release those amino acids to the blood. tRNA then grab those, push them to the ribosome, and you start that production again. Okay. So now you've learned about the proteins. It doesn't matter what source, that's the process it goes through for the metabolism to digest it and absorb it. Once it's in the blood, it gets transported around the body, cells uptake it and give it a new role, and that transcription process occurs within the ribosomes. How much do we need? Well, the RDA, the recommended daily allowance, is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Okay, so I'll give an example here for a 150-pound female. Divide that by 2.2 to get the kilograms out of pounds, and you can see they need around 54 grams of protein a day. Now, this is the RDA for the average population. Now, if you have injury, if you are an athlete, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to gain weight, if you're going to add stress to the body, trying to create change, then you need more protein, because that's what protein does. It creates new tissue, it moves things around, creates hormones. So if you're trying to change the body, that you are adding stress, and with that more stress, you need more protein. And that can go all the way up to 2 grams per kilogram. Okay, so that's almost the amount that you are weighing in pounds. You can see the 150-pound female there needs 136 grams at the high end at 2 grams per kilogram. Now, strength athletes are going to be closer to that. Endurance athletes probably not as high. Weight loss closer to that. And hopefully I'll explain why that in the next slide, of why it is often proteins misconceived of something to gain weight, tending to gain muscle mass and gain tissue, where it actually has a role in weight loss too. And a lot of people underutilize and underconsume protein, and sadly don't actually achieve much weight loss. The AMDR, which is the acceptable macro distribution range, is 10 to 30% of your total caloric intake. What does this mean? It means if you counted all the calories in your diet, the recommendation roughly is about 2,000 calories per day. 10% up to 30% of that 2,000 calories should come from protein. So I did the math there for you on this example for 2,000 calories. 10%, 2,000 calories is 200 calories. 200 calories, there are 4 calories in every gram of protein. So you divide it by 4, that is 50 grams of protein. If you have the 30% on the high end for a 2,000 calorie diet, that's 600 calories divided by 4, 150 grams of protein. Now, that's a 2,000 calorie diet. Maybe that satisfies someone that weighs 150 pounds, but I know I consume more than 2,000 calories, so my numbers will be a little bit higher. These are 2 different ways that you can get your recommendations, but it will be based on your goals, the type of diet that you're consuming, not just protein, but fat and carbohydrate intake as well, and your training age, your age, your experience, and your goals. That leads me to this one. Okay, considerations. What other things you think about when you take protein outside of just the amino acids that you're consuming? Your carbohydrate availability. Okay, when you have high amounts of carbohydrate in your body, you've got a lot of energy to use. You're not going to be relying on protein for energy, so it can actually have roles on those other functions that I listed in the previous slides. Your enzymes, your hormones, your tissue building, or transport, fluid balance, those things, and not energy. Now, if you're low on carbohydrate, maybe you're trying to diet, then you're not going to have that availability for energy, and protein may be used more for energy, which then means it cannot be used for the other areas. So we want to try and consume more protein if our carbohydrate is low. That way we are bolstering basically the use of protein for energy in that way. The other thing, look at saturated fat content on your protein sources. Okay, your protein isolate supplements are going to be fine, no saturated fat. But when you look at real sources that we always recommend, real food over supplements, but like beef, for example, you buy beef based on its percentage of fat. Do you get 70% beef? Do you get 80%, 85, 90% beef? Obviously, the price changes with that, but you're buying how much fat you're getting, and it is saturated fat. Now, we should always try to consume less than 10% of our total fat intake coming from saturated fat. We want to look at unsaturated sources, polyunsaturated sources, which are better for your health, that aren't linked to the heart disease, the metabolic diseases that saturated fat is in the majority of our population, which is unhealthy. So be careful on the saturated fat content. Fish is a great source because it doesn't have saturated fat, but it does have the unsaturated fat. I talked about the protein digestive corrected amino acid score, looking at the fiber content of those different sources, so be aware of that. Then your age, obviously, you need protein based on the cells and keeping cells alive. So the bigger you are, the more protein you need. Okay, that's why we get a recommendation of grams per kilogram based on how big you are. Now, if you're younger, you're not as big, you don't need as much protein. And if you're older adult, you don't need as much protein. Because of your activity level, because you should be smaller, you are less active, you're probably eating less, your hormone levels are less, metabolism is less, just general whole caloric metabolism movement decreases with age. So protein with that decreases. You might not have to change as a percentage of your diet, but the amount that you're actually consuming decreases. In addition, training level or training age, I call it. If you are brand new to resistance training, workouts, gym going, then you need a little bit more protein because that is a stress that your body isn't used to. And so it takes about 2 weeks to actually habitualize and become normalized to exercise. And the use of protein goes up in those first 2 weeks and then kind of tapers back down again as you're just not used to that stress level. And you also don't absorb and utilize all the amino acids through the digestive process. You don't actually absorb it all because you're like, I don't know if I need this, and your body's just not good and very efficient at using them. And the last thing is goals. Okay, so again, I mentioned it before, but I haven't even listed injuries. If you're injured, you get repair and recovery, protein needs to be increased closer to that 2 grams per kilogram. But goals, like I said, trying to gain weight, well, you probably need to consume more calories, right? That's how you gain weight. If you're trying to consume more calories, just a percentage of your diet, protein should increase with it. But also if you are resistance training, because if we're trying to gain weight, it shouldn't just be any weight, it should try to be lean tissue, muscle mass. And in order to do that, we need protein to be consumed. We're working out more, we're getting more damage, we need to recover and have more protein to do that. What about the weight loss? Yeah, we need more protein again. Think about it. If you are trying to lose weight in a healthy manner, you're going to decrease your caloric intake. Okay, so as a percentage, your protein may decrease, but so would your carbohydrate and fat intake. So like I said before, if your carbohydrate availability is low, more reliance on protein for fuel. If you're using it for fuel, you're not using it for the other functions. And therefore we might need to bolster and give you a little more protein for that effect. In addition to that, you're trying to lose weight, you're probably working out more, right? You're running more, you're doing more cardio, you're creating more damage and more tissue use, more stress on the body. That's a role protein has to come in, repair you, and replenish that. So yeah, whether it's gain or loss, if you are trying to create change, that is a stress, and protein's going to be there to try and help you through that. Okay, so that's protein. Okay, hopefully it's all understandable and not too difficult, not too complicated. If you were watching for extra credit, send me that email with the code word amino acids. I'll be happy to add that to your score. And yeah, let me know if you have questions. My email's there, andy.sykes@wishart.edu. Have a great day.